Welcome once again to Syntax Error, your pretentious philosophical pedantic podcast ostensibly about video gaming and related topics therein. Warning, this podcast contains mature language, content, and spoilers. You have been warned. Hello and welcome once again to Syntax Error. Today's topic is going to be remakes, remasters, remix, where we discuss games that have been either remade or remastered in HD, etc. It seems to be sort of a trend, which I'll get into. And I am Scott Thurlow here, and I am joined by Stephen Ormosi.
I am Stephen Ormosi.
And I'm also joined by Jonathan Ian Manzer.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer.
Alright guys, so I guess the broad question I'm going to pose to you is, do you think we need as many remasters that versus what seems to be coming out? Like, I have a huge list here, I'll read a couple out, but it just seems in general, they're just pumping these remasters out. Like, do you think it's, is it productive, or is it just profiteering on the part of the devs, or is there some kind of in between? I'll ask Ian first. Go ahead. What do you think?
I think that when you deal with whether music, movies, video games, like re-editions occur often, especially as technology evolves. You had I have LPs of Beatles albums that I had on cassette, that I had on CD. They're doing specifically remastered editions of even CDs now with better technology that comes out. I have the VHS Star Wars as well as Star Wars on my PS3. So I think that it's natural that games will follow that same thing, that as technology advances, they'll re-release classic games.
Fair enough. Go ahead, Steve-O.
I think that there is a kind of reverse statute of limitations that should be invoked on remasters, right? So, like, as you mentioned, Star Wars came out in the 70s?
78, I believe. Star Wars.
So, a re-release, fine. I'm okay with that. Like, update it for the HD generation, whatever.
Current gen, if you will, yeah.
A couple games that I had in mind that have recently been remastered or just re-released. Doom,
right.
Grim Fandango, even Oddworld.
Abe's Odyssey, yeah.
Right. However, I think that a lot of production companies are going really overboard with this. Looking at you, re-releasing Arkham, re-releasing GTA 5 like 6 times.
Well, they're porting it to
current gen.
Sure. So they had games that came out on PS3 that I understand if they're upgrading it to be released on PS4.
Right, but what's like so?
Well, the difference is HD, of course.
I kind of understand it insofar as with the new PlayStation generation, there's no backwards compatibility, which I think
bullshit.
Which I think is kind of a problem,
of course, but
right? So if you had a backwards compatible PlayStation, you could just get the last version for a very reduced price at this point, because the game has been out for 3 or 4 years. You know, like the fact that you're re-releasing it 3 or 4 years after it came out, I think is a problem in and of itself.
I would agree with that. The backward compatibility definitely is something that's ridiculous, especially since from everything I know, it has the ability to do backward compatibility.
It's not like they can't do it; they're just not going to. You know?
Well, they always have before.
Or at least they used to be, sort of.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Got it.
But I think that you're right. There should be, in a sense, a kind of statute of limitations on whether there's a difference between being a port and, profiteering. But there has been, like, this is not unique to just this generation.
That's true, I guess.
I remember playing a re-edition of Final Fantasy III on the PlayStation, where they added cutscenes, a few of them, a beastery. But yeah, that's the standard gameplay. So this, like, while yes, it's probably more prevalent now, especially the technology has caught up, this is by no means unique.
I guess the question, I like to sort of a sub-question to that is that, which ones deserve to be remake? And I guess sub question, how long of the time gap should there be between like having it really? I'll give you a good example. Something you just said. Resident Evil 4, I know, was re-released like you can play it on your phone now, and it's like, things like that. They re-released that game many times, but because it was so popular and so good, that maybe like the masses wanted it, so they did it. But maybe not. That might not be true for other games.
So, as far as re-releases go, I think that there are certain ones that make sense, and there are certain ones that don't. Like,
but who judges that? Us, the gamers, of course.
Well, yeah.
Go on.
As far as phone ports go, as you just mentioned, Resident Evil 4, you said? I'm not completely against that. I'm guessing that it's not a $60 game, It's probably like a $5 phone port or something, or like maybe
like
$10.
I don't have the numbers for you in that, but you're right. It has to be that. It's not going to be $60,
right?
Of course not.
And that's all right, because to port something like that into a completely different format. It's not a console,
OS,
it was originally a console game. To completely change the platform makes it kind of worth it to spend the extra $10. If you want to be able to play it on your phone, then go ahead and spend $10 and play it on your phone.
A good example of that is I believe it was PlayStation released the Genesis, all the Genesis games on one CD.
Yes,
and that makes perfect sense to your point.
Right, and I think that's fine, especially because those games are so old at this point. Where like if you want to play them,
even if you want to, it's going to be difficult.
Right,
yeah.
Sure. You can't just. Most people can't just bust out their Genesis anymore and like play those games. Like most people don't have a Genesis anymore.
Although the emulators
serve that point. Yeah, sure.
Right, but I think that. So I think that the idea of remastering these old games, or like remaking these old games, is to kind of undermine the piracy of their games.
Perhaps.
Clearly, if you have an emulator, which don't tell anybody at a big gaming company or anything, but I've gotten some emulators before.
Keep it a secret, kids.
Yeah, keep this under your hats.
Go on.
But using those, making those games again is a way to keep them
relevant. Maybe
not so like
in the public eye.
Maybe not so much relevant, or it is a way to keep it is a way to keep them relevant, but it's a way to like stop people from just like. Who want to play them. If there are enough people that want to play it, and are enough people that are going to download the emulator, you might as well make money on it.
If the demand is there, of course. Yeah,
right.
Agreed.
But if you're remaking, like, there was talk of remaking the original, this wasn't actual talk. It was just, like, somebody did a fan remake in a better engine of Bioshock recently.
I was going to bring that up, yeah, go on.
And that... While yes, it looks slightly nicer. Like, I don't think there's any reason to remake the original Bioshock. Granted, it is nice for like a younger generation to be able to play that game. However, is that taking away from developers who want to make new games? Do you think?
Well, to go to kind of one of my favorite games of all time, Morrowind has a great modding community.
Yeah.
I did a little bit of modding myself.
Skywind. Yeah.
That was
Morrowind plus Skyrim, or like they put Morrowind into the Skyrim engine.
Oh, but I'm talking about Morrowind, and they actually updated it for modern day graphics engines.
Yes, right. Yes.
So to make it, and it's not unplayable, the old game, but it does have those.
It's noticeable.
It's noticeable. Sure. So this updates it, so it's still like equivalent. But I hope this isn't stepping too much on your toes, Scott. But I feel that before we get into like what works and what doesn't, you have very much like movies. You have updates, like from, in a sense, as we said, from like VHS to DVD to Blu-ray, which you see in games.
Right.
You have remakes of movies, and you see remakes of games, which are completely either updating. I'll give a great example is they reintroduced Sam & Max,
right,
which was a great adventure game back in
classics.
The day.
Yeah, sure.
And they made basically new episodes for it. and it's still great. I love the sense of humor of Sam and Max. And then you have, in a sense, the Star Wars special editions,
right?
Which
they
keep the original and make tweaks that are not necessarily for the better. So I kind of want to discuss what you prefer. Would you like to see classic? I remember they released a HD trailer of Final Fantasy VII, the opening of Final Fantasy VII.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's right. I remember that.
A couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people were speculating whether they were going to make a new version of Final Fantasy VII completely updated. Would you like to see not just in a sense, the updated re-releases, but just remakes of games?
Well, I guess that's the point. So, the terms are sort of redundant and or vague. There's also reboots, which I neglected to mention. Like the newest Thief is a good example. It was a reboot of the Thief series franchise. Mm-hmm. And it was a completely new game, but yes, it was using the legacy of that franchise, if you will, to sort of draw the audience or the original audience who was a fan of that. Mm-hmm. But I think it's a sort of a weird, again, very fine line, because let me give you guys a couple examples. I know, the case for me personally was that I switched from Microsoft. I had a 360 for many years, and then I got a PS4. So there were certain games on PS4 that, of course, were exclusive that I couldn't play originally. And as we said, since nothing was backwards compatible, then I was screwed. But it's nice, I guess, that they re-released them. But again, it's a fine line. An example within that example is that I bought The Last of Us Remastered, but that game came out at the tail end of the PS3 generation. Right. So they I get it. They wanted to quickly put it out so you can get it for PS4, and that's fine. But again, some of it may not be necessarily, if you will.
So. Last of Us is a good example. That's a crazy thing to me, because that was a game where if there was backwards compatibility, should have been much cheaper. You shouldn't be able to sell that game for $60. It came out a year ago.
Game. That's what I'm saying.
And it should be a cheaper game at this point, but you're just reselling it.
It was $10 cheaper. I'll tell you that.
Okay.
So it was $50 at a 60. So sure, it's nice, but.
I guess I appreciate that. So, anyway, what I was going to say earlier was games at this point are possibly taking a page out of the film playbook and just starting to do reboots and stuff like that.
That's what I'm saying.
So, I can't stand reboots.
I disagree, because there's certain games that work. For instance, Abe's Odyssey. I played a little bit of the original. I played and beat the it was PS1 version of it.
I believe.
And I respect that, because they just did a graphical texturing on it.
A fresh coat of paint.
Yes. But did you play the new Grim Fandango? Correct.
I haven't played it yet. I want to. I'll talk about that. I played the original one. And I appreciate. I'll answer that question.
Yeah, I played the original one as well, and I heard that the new one, while updating it graphically wise, does not fix
the bugs. Yes, I heard that as well.
And that if you can't there's certain games that don't apply to that. Just putting a new paint job and selling the same old car. Sometimes you need to have that reboot to keep the story, but update it for modern day gameplay.
Sure.
I'm gonna slightly argue with you, I guess. Games have not really gotten into their reboot phase yet. They're just doing remasters mostly. It's not. Again, we're not painting with broad strokes here, but or we are painting with broad strokes.
There are more remasters than there are reboots, but there are a number of both.
I struggle to think of a game that was rebooted.
Thief, as Scott brought up.
Right. I'm sorry. I never played.
That's a good.
I never played the original or the reboot, so it doesn't matter. But or to me, it's not a salient thing. But perhaps that's something.
Sam and Max, as I brought up earlier as well, was a reboot.
But what I was going to say is, I think that they're starting to move in that direction, and I think that's going to start happening more and more, because it's become a way to make money in movies, so it's going to become a way to make money in games.
And hasn't Nintendo been working on that model of rebooting
it's their fucking business model,
well,
really.
Yeah, but they call them sequels, so
they're not rebooting it. They're just making the same games with the same characters, but they're technically different games.
Yeah, exactly. But no, it's not rebooting it because there was not like for a lot of those games that we're talking about, other than perhaps the Zelda games. It's not like there wasn't really a story there to begin with. Like, you could call every Mario, like every generation Mario a reboot if you want to. However, it's just a sequel. No, to me, those are just sequels.
I get it. It's a distinction, perhaps blurry here and there, but to the point you just said, it was sort of both. Like, another example, they re-released Majora's Mask for 3DS. It's the same game, just you could, like you said, you can get it on that platform now. Have they put anything new into it? I don't believe so.
I don't think
so.
But
they did that. They did do with the Link to the Past thing, where like they put a whole new mechanic where you could like go 2D and like merge into the wall. If you know what I'm talking about, when they released that for the 3DS.
No, I didn't hear about that.
Right. So like, yeah, it was Link to the Past plus a different mechanic, therefore plus different puzzles and different, I believe, dungeons.
But that's not exactly a reboot. That's the same game with an extra mechanic.
Yeah, but I think that
it adds to it in a sense.
You can't particularly call like the reboot. The concept of reboot doesn't necessarily apply to video games as much as it does to film.
Agreed.
But
it can, and I think it's going to more and more in the coming days.
But the concept that like films have a certain narrative structure where they establish a continuity and then cut it off and build up. Like, video games have this thing where they'll recycle the same. Nintendo, I just brought up as an example. They'll recycle the same. Kind of the foundation, but update gameplay, and I don't know. This is where the distinction between films and video games departs.
But I think that's an older model of video games. I think that in the newer model, there's more of a canon, and I think that what the reboot does is resets the canon back to the beginning. So like you have a clean slate again where you start the canon all over again. And that's the entire design of a reboot.
Sure, it could. I mean, it could do that. In theory, that's what a reboot should be and imply. And yes, I agree with you. I think they're moving somewhat towards that. Or like, there's more. It's becoming more of a standard of what qualifies as such, etc. But I want to point something out. Like, let me give another example. I know Injustice is sort of the same thing that I mentioned earlier. That falls into like, they put it out like at the beginning of the PS4 generation. But this is the point I want to raise, and you guys can perhaps address it. It's a pricing thing. Abe's Odyssey, the remake, was free, for me at least. For PS Plus members, it was free. So I just could get it. Injustice was also free at the time. So, you know what I mean? Like,
I'm fine with that.
They're not profiteering. Yeah, I'm saying, like, it's the opposite of the Last of Us thing, I guess. Like, you know, they're releasing pretty much the same game for almost full price versus giving you a remaster for free. Yes, even though you subscribe to the service, it's like a bonus, like, you know, a perk.
Well, to be fair, now if you buy a new PS4, The Last of Us is included in the bundle a lot of times now. Yeah. So, like, a lot of these, they're just trying to, like, give them back to you, which I'm okay with. I don't mind that stuff.
I don't think it's the worst, most scumbaggy thing. In fact, it's sort of noble in a sense when they do that.
I wouldn't go so far as to say noble. I
respect them for doing it.
I have a specific question for you, Steve. You're a fan of the Metal Gear Solid universe.
It's been well established
franchise, yes.
Well, I played the original Metal Gear Solid. They did a remastered version for GameCube, I believe, or Twin Snakes or something like that. I can't remember.
I think that's right. However, why I don't have really a problem with that is because it was never released on a Nintendo system before that. Mm-hmm. So if you want to put it out on a completely different, like something that you could never get in, like if you're a complete Nintendo head, say, and you really wanted to play Metal Gear Solid, but you had never been able to before.
But they updated it quite a bit, so in fact they're giving more to the Nintendo audience than they did to the original.
I don't really know what was on the Nintendo one. I never played it, but perhaps that's true. I think that they might have just included. So I don't know much about it. I remember
you're the biggest MGS fan. You know shit.
Well, I don't know about the Nintendo release, but like I remember that they certainly included the VR missions, which like were later a thing that was its own game on PlayStation, I think. But
it was like early DLC almost.
I think there was the VR on PlayStation. I downloaded.
It was on PlayStation, but it was its own separate game. It wasn't included with the original Metal Gear Solid.
Well, it was included on the one you can buy on the PS3.
I think there was like a Game of the Year edition that had them both or something like that. But before I go into that, or before any of us go into that,
okay.
What I wanted to say was I don't know. Maybe you know more about this than I do, and as
if I do, I'll tell you.
A question to either one of you, if you know it, was the gameplay or was the plot changed in Metal Gear Solid for the GameCube? I very much doubt it because the plot was like very.
No, the plot was
specific.
I think the gameplay was changed. I don't quote me on that. I'm not exactly sure. I never played it. I just trying to work off of memory of what I've heard about it.
Sure. So like, perhaps we should have researched that more or whatever. But I get what you're getting at. Like, and I'll bring it back to something Steve-O just quickly mentioned. The Game of the Year sort of thing. That's sort of like I would say like sort of the genesis, the precursor of this kind of stuff. Like, games that include all the DLC. Right, they're not remaking it or anything, but you get an edition which has extra content that was not in the original game that you would have paid for separately.
And I always kind of like those because they were, if I remember correctly, like originally they were a little bit cheaper than like buying
because they had come out like a year or so after all that stuff.
But they also included like extra shit, like most of the time.
No, some of them I believe are similar, same value. So like if the Game of the Year edition just came out, it would be like $60, but it would include all DLCs.
All the DLCs, yeah. Which
so
is
you are.
I don't think anybody really does the Game of the Year editions anymore, do they?
Yeah, they do.
They still do, but again, I'm raising that point because it's a very quickly evolving.
I guess I haven't been in a game store in a
method.
long time. Like looked at the games.
They certainly do.
You can buy both Game of the Year editions, and you can also buy like. Again, I have a PlayStation 3, so it's mostly what I hear from PlayStation Classic games, which generally include everything as well. And they're generally cheaper, but they're also games that have been out for a number of years.
So what I like about PlayStation and Xbox is the fact that you can buy old games on them, like like digital, original Xbox games, or like original PlayStation games, which I really love. I talked about it on a recent bonus points, but like I bought Xenogears, which was really fun, and unfortunately I haven't played as much of it as I would like to, but at some point I'm certainly going to go back to it. But that's another thing, like, as far as reboots go, or remasters or whatever, like
remix, as I said. Yes.
I kind of like the fact that you can sometimes just go back and play the original games, like they're available still in digital format.
So I think I brought this up before, but I would like to go back to this. If you had a game that was, in a sense, modernized now, would you prefer a game that is like rebooted with keeping the same storyline but with updated gameplay? Would you like a game that is with the same mechanics but they fix the problems, or would you prefer a direct port?
Okay, the answer to that, I would say it depends, and I'll pose this question because they did re-release, etc., remaster Secret of Monkey Island. I don't want them to change anything about that game.
But they didn't. They only updated the graphics.
It looks nicer. Exactly, that's what I'm getting at. So it depends, right? I would have to basically take it on a game-by-game basis and have to be like, you have to fix this. I'll give you guys another quick example. Deadly Premonition was sort of a weird, quirky game. I loved it. It was Twin Peaks the game almost. Mm-hmm. However, the controls were totally fucked. Like, it was completely unintuitive. And then they did put out a director's HD edition or whatever that fixed that, and like the map was fixed, etc. So yeah, they fixed like very obvious gameplay flaws in that game and kept everything else the same. That I think is the optimal way to do it, or that's at least my broad answer is that's what I would say. I look at the game like the Grim Fandango thing. Like, why didn't they fix the bugs? Sure, it looks nicer for HD, but fix the fucking original bugs, like that was a mistake on their part, I would think.
To speak to something you said, I don't see, maybe this is something that we should talk about as far as definitions go, but I don't see a game that has the same story as a reboot. I think in order to call something a reboot,
I think you're getting caught up in semantics a little bit here.
Yeah,
right,
but
then I will agree. Well, we won't call it a reboot. Then a
remaster or something like that.
But a remaster implies that it's keeping you're touching up the original product.
What exists, but not changing.
I'm talking about, for instance, if
it's bullshit semantics is what I'm saying.
No, but I think it's an important distinction because there are both or all three categories. I'm sorry, Ian. Go ahead.
That's true.
But let's say I know you're a fan of Final Fantasy VII. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm talking about taking the plotline of Final Fantasy VII, but updating it to modern day, like Final Fantasy style, like gameplay mechanics. So you're not a blocky figure walking. I mean, like, not only updating graphics, but I mean like kind of re-rendering the world, rebuild. Like it's the same familiar areas. You're still going to Midgard and all the other etc. But like the gameplay is almost unrecognizable because, like, to be frank, the style of old school
it's
RPGs
outdated now. Yeah, I agree with that.
Are almost unfeasible nowadays. So,
but well, I would agree. As far as an RPG goes, like clearly some people have had success, going retro. Let's say in their games,
going retro,
Hotline
like
Miami, CB1 or whatever, what have you. But I would say that if you're gonna completely change the stylization of a game, if you wanted to make Final Fantasy VII as a Final Fantasy 15 game graphically, I think that would necessarily have an influence on the plot, and I think it would change the plot somewhat.
I think that what you're holding on to this concept of what it meant to you, versus allowing if the story is as in depth as you believe it is, then the story should be able to carry it, and you should be able to open it up to a new generation who don't have the expectation of gamings that you do.
I don't think that's the case. I think.
But how can you tell?
Well,
it's automatic bias, of course.
So like I'm trying to turn this all over in my head and trying to obviously jump past any biases I have, but I don't think that's the case, just because I think that if you change the way that the game, if you update the way that the game looks that much, you can keep the same core story for sure. However, it's going to impact all of the things that you can do with it, and I think that to use the same exact even like a little side things, like, I think that you can include so much more just because you have so much better, like the graphics are so much better, like there's so much more detail. When you get into that detail, you're gonna take notice of the new details that you're including in the game, and those will impact how you tell the story.
So if it would no longer be Final Fantasy VII, if it was updated,
right,
then is that a reboot?
I think it would be.
Qualifies more as
I think it would be a reboot. Yeah.
So then there is no way of having a direct of transition without having something become a reboot.
That's not true.
That's what I'm saying. Like it gets sort of again like blurry in that sense. Like which one depending on what they do with the game, whatever their touch-ups, etc., they're going to do with it, what one does it fall under which umbrella? Like, it's odd. It's weird to think. Like, it's hard to classify that.
So I don't think that's true. Like, if you do we were discussing Bioshock earlier. I think if you did Bioshock in a newer engine, I think you do the same exact game, just looks nicer, which
but we're talking about
not a reboot. Which is not
combat mechanics.
Okay, let me
So, like, if you're going to change the combat mechanics, I think that you have to necessarily make changes in the plot. You know, if you're gonna change
I don't know if I agree with that.
No. If you're gonna make a change in a fundamental part of the game like that, then I think that's gonna affect the way that the plot
maybe not
is affected.
All right, I'll use Bioshock. In 2, you could dual-wield plasmids and guns. If that's all they change about Bioshock 1, like, I think I would be fine with that. I probably would play a remaster of it if that's the one thing they change. And the plot itself is still fine. It's exactly the same. They don't have to change anything else about that. That would be a gameplay mechanic that would be... They couldn't do it or just didn't originally. That would be awesome. And I would definitely play a remake of that for that reason.
I would definitely play a remake of Chrono Trigger. I would definitely love to see a 3D rendering of Zeal.
Sure, okay.
The fight
like
on
I said,
the Blackbird. I mean, again, like it's. I think that if you go back again, if they attempted to do that, they would be driven out of town on that triangular log.
Sure.
So imagine they did that, right?
Yes.
So they completely render everything in like the highest quality graphics that they possibly can, right? Can they leave everything the same?
No, obviously not. But that's
what else?
I'm saying,
what else? Like, just take that to its logical conclusion. Like, what? I mean, and I don't know. Like, I'm not trying to be an asshole about this, but like, what would you change if you could render everything in like way more realistic fashion than you could then? Like, what would change? Like the things that you can interact with.
Yes.
So what would that change? Like, what's the butterfly effect on that? Like that's kind
true,
of.
But we shouldn't fear it just because it's changed.
I'm not afraid of it.
I want to see it. As I said, like, it would depend on how well it's pulled off and, like, you know, what things they decide to do, how far they decide to go with it, you know, with their, again, in quotes, remake, remaster, etc.
Right.
You know, I don't know. Like, all right, I'll give you, like, we mentioned earlier GTA 5. Like, that's a really good example. Like, one of the big things indeed is that you could play it in first-person view. You could never do that in any GTA game. That is one of the reasons why it was delayed a bit, but that was a huge, like, literally game-changing mechanic.
So that was like the remaster, right? Like that was a re-release or whatever it was. Yeah, like you couldn't do that in the original one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, like that would be something that might interest people to play it again.
I don't think that would change anything that happens in the plot.
Sure, but
right. So like it's like switching in between first and third person in Skyrim or Fallout. You know, like.
Yes, but you could always do that in those games. You could never play any GTA first person.
Right, but what I'm saying is, like, I don't think that changes the plot. Whereas,
no, it doesn't, of course not.
If you completely update graphics from, like, 2 generations ago till now...
It would change the plot necessarily sometimes.
I think that necessarily makes you, like, look at the things that are there and be like, I can do so much more with this. Like, you know...
But here's what's interesting is, again, I've been playing remastered versions for my entire life. I've played updated translations of games. Like, I played A Secret of Mana, which completely changes the storyline when you understand what they are actually trying to say.
So I call that a reboot.
But it's the same. It's all the same kind of thing. It's just the dialogue's updated, the retranslated. So, if anything, it would be a retranslation.
Yeah, exactly. Another term that we now have to consider. Sure.
I guess it's certainly a gray area. You know, like there's some point in there in between reboot,
that's what I'm saying.
Remaster, and you know re-release, whatever the hell. That's a gray area that you can't really quantify per se, or it's tough.
Difficult to quantify.
There was a term in old school RPGs called Woozlyisms, which is based off of the American translator of the Japanese, and he added his own kind of absurd strangeness to games, which like are absent of the Japanese. And like he tends to add levity where there was like this kind of dour,
very seriousness,
scenarios. So yeah, it's like it was like playing a game new, but I love all of them. I love
it's almost like fan fiction for games in a sense. But I mean, it was his job to like translate it. So like he would kind of slip it in, if you will. Mm-hmm. But I'll bring something. So yeah, all right. Quick example. I would play a remake HD remaster of Red Dead Redemption. Like that's a game I love. Mm-hmm. But it's hard to like decide which ones I would or would not. Like for example, I mentioned in other previous recent casts that I just started playing Borderlands, the pre-sequel, which I bought when it came out for Xbox 360 and had sitting around. the Handsome Jack or just the Handsome collection, which includes it's the new current gen of Borderlands 2 and the pre-sequel. If I had just waited and not bought that game when it come out, I could get them both now. Like, yes, even though I already played Borderlands 2, but certainly I wouldn't mind playing the pre-sequel on new gen, on current gen, if I just waited. So, like, that I don't mind that. That's fine in a sense. It's just that, the timing of it is a little weird. You have to consider that a little bit. Go ahead.
To reiterate my last point, I just remember that I played a Baldur's Gate retranslation, which added even mechanics and romances.
I would say they had was it the enhanced edition? Like that's what I have. Yeah, okay, yeah.
And it had taken Baldur's Gate 2 mechanics, which is recognized as one of the greatest like RPGs.
It was a monumental one, yeah, sure.
And added those mechanics to the original game. But again, it enhanced. So I think that, like, while yes, people will kind of, I feel, screw up remasters here and there or trying to update games. I think that I think that if you're trying to capture the greatness of the past and make them a little bit more playable, try to fix the mistakes, try to upgrade, then you should, especially if it's in competent hands.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. Another quick thing, thing about like games you could play on that were available only, like Half-Life I think is a good example. That was a PC game, but they years later they had it on the orange box. You get like that in Portals. So people who, like I myself never played Half-Life on a PC because I couldn't when it originally was out. But that's very awesome of them that it was available now on a platform which I could access that I could not previously.
They also did the new one on this Black Mesa Source or something like that.
Yeah, or something like that.
Which was a completely...
You know more about that than me. But yeah.
Which was a complete upgrade and really redid everything to modern day style. And I don't think it detracts at all from the original Half-Life story.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, Half-Life is an interesting one to talk about for this because it originally came out for the PC and... That was all it was on for a while.
It was sort of a cult
I think
game,
even until after Half-Life 2 and then the two...
I believe that is correct.
So, the Orange Box, I think, was the first time that... this may not be true, but I think it was the first time that it came to consoles. So
I think that is
That
true.
was Half-Life 2, Team Fortress, which is a whole other, incredible...
Whatever, that's fine, yeah.
...thing.
Portal. And the episodes
Portal
for Half-Life 2.
And episode 1 and 2 of Half-Life 2, which was an amazing package. It was incredible.
Agreed. It was bang for your buck, out the ass, if you will.
And that is the type of re-release
that is a very well done release. Agreed.
Love that type of thing where it's like, all right, now you can get this on a console, and I have no problem with that. So what I guess the only thing that I have a real issue with is the obvious
cash grabs.
Yeah, for lack of a better term,
yeah, that's
the obvious cash grabs, we put this out at the end of at basically end of life for the last console, and now the new console's out, and we're gonna re-release it and charge you basically the same amount of money for a game that came out a year ago.
Sure.
That's kind of brutal. You know what? I appreciate the updating of graphics, and if you haven't, I guess what it is I look at people that buy these games twice or 3 times, and I'm like, I feel like you just got screwed out of money. Whereas if you only have the new console and then you buy it only for the new console, I guess it's fine. It's not a big deal. Whatever. But I actually wanted to make this point earlier, and I kind of forgot about it. I'm sorry to go into another thing. I know you want to say something, Ian, but what it is that this takes. So putting out these new games, regardless of the difference between putting out a VHS, then transferring it to DVD, then a Blu-ray, then a digital, is that those are easily transferred, whereas if you put out a re-release of a game, it still has to be play tested again. You have to put the developer has to put in time on doing this, and that's time that could be spent on making another game.
Sure.
You know,
that's a good point.
That was basically what I wanted to say earlier, and I kind of forgot about it.
One, to go all the way back.
Rewind.
I remember when,
Rewind, remix, good.
I remember when Half-Life first came out. I got it for Christmas, and I was blown away by the graphics.
It looked amazing when it came out.
They still look good to this day.
Secondly, to your point on that, to go back to, once again, our first thing, it's the consumers who should decide if people are willing to pay for it. Stavo, shouldn't they be able to get away with that? Secondly, if you believe that there's a certain time frame for games to...
A window that they should or should not.
What is the window?
I think the window has to do with the generation gap. So like, or the console gap. So if a game came out for a PC, I think it's all right to sell it again, like maybe slightly updated for a new console. Or if it was a PS exclusive and then Xbox somehow gets the rights to it later,
that's a good
fine.
point. That's a very good point.
I don't mind that, like that kind of re-release. What I do mind is like it came out on PlayStation and then it came out on PlayStation again like a year later. Like that's kind of brutal to me,
But it does take time to, like, for instance, something came out on PS3. It does take time for them to develop for PS4. So should PS4 people be denied? Now, granted, I agree with you about backward compatibility.
We all agree about that.
But considering the state of affairs, should
given that.
PS4 people be denied that game because it came out on PS3 originally?
Certainly not. And like I think that's where that nonsense comes in. Like I think it's fucking bullshit that you can't play a PS3 game on the PS4.
That is, but yeah, here we are. It is what it is, of course.
However, I think that you should be able to download that same PS3 game through the PSN network, or I guess it's the PSN. That's
yes. Go on.
Redundant, but
redundancy remake.
I think that you should be able to download that at whatever price that game is going for at the time on the PSN, without having to go and buy a whole new like as though it's a new game. Like it's certainly just a rehashed same thing, maybe slightly updated, but I think that you can take that time that you spent updating the graphics and put it into a different game as opposed to, completely replay testing the game and making sure it works. And
I mean, I get it. Like, so I'll bring it back to of course you're right. The market, the audience will decide what lives or dies or what fails or succeeds because and I think something you mentioned is a very important point because I guess where we are now in the cycle of consoles, like the Last of Us thing. They knew the next generation was about to hit, and that was a very popular game. So if you didn't own a PS3, they wanted it to be available. So yeah, they released it. So again, I'm just my only major point here is that it's going to come down to whether or not you decide a game is worth double dipping on, if you will.
Right.
And if you think it is, again, I'm debating with myself whether or not to get the Arkham re-releases because I could still play those games for X360 if I wanted to right now, but I may play them again for current gen.
Right. I feel like it's somewhat of a slippery slope.
It is. I agree with that.
We're like, all right, now you're spending $50 on a Last of Us re-release where all PlayStation had to do was just make it available for download.
Exactly.
All they had to do was make it available for download.
Fuck you, Sony. Come on, just do it
at $30, and you don't need to remaster the graphics or anything like that. Play the original game. It came out a year ago.
Yes, you do, because the graphics capabilities of a PS3 or an Xbox 360 versus that next generation are very different, and people who own those high-end game consoles will want graphics that match what their expectations are.
Right, but I think that if you play an old game, you should have the expectation that you're playing an old game. Perhaps if it's 2, 3, 4 generations ago, perhaps update it. But if it came out,
they can't make Doom be Halo.
If it literally came out a damn year ago, there's no reason to remaster just so you can charge $50 for it again. All you have to do is make it downloadable on a new console, and
or
then
patch even maybe.
But you're acting like every single person bought The Last of Us for the previous generation,
but it doesn't matter.
Are going to just rebuy it. This is for people. This is creating
like me who didn't
extend the life of that.
I agree, but that game was the game. That was the released game. That was their final product. Like, just release it as a download.
But it wasn't their final product.
Well, obviously not now because they can make more money on it. Except for, I doubt that. You know what? I honestly think that they would make more money selling it as a $30 game as opposed to re-releasing it as a $50 game.
Well, just real quickly, of course, you can download it if you want. Like, I bought the disc copy, but you could still pay $50 and download it. That's not what you're saying, but
right. What I'm saying is, like, I think that it should cost the amount that it should cost after it's been out for this amount of time. I don't think that you need to slightly update graphics and then re-release it.
Sure, I get it. So, you know, again, I think we're gonna wind down a bit, but you know, it's a weird cusp of like, you know, where games are, you know, falling into like these kind of like what is worthy of being remade / whatever you want to call it. Remix. Exactly. So, you know, and yes, at the end of the day, surely the market will drive it. It's just that it seems to me like it just seems to be the trend that more and more are being offered recently. So we'll see which ones live or die. But here's something interesting. I'll leave off with this. There are a couple of things that haven't been re-released, etc. yet that fans are like clamoring for. Like people want Kingdom Hearts for new remade. Right. People like there should be like I argue there should be a Mass Effect bundle for like 1, 2, and 3 bundled, you know, as Game of the Year editions or whatever.
I'm
for
surprised
new gen.
There's not that
right,
already.
Right, or Crysis. I have a whole bunch. A Crysis bundle would be sweet too. Like Far Cry 2 and 3 would be a good bundle. So it's interesting to see which ones have or have not made it yet. Maybe they are working on those.
As a short final thing, what would you expect those games to be like updated, like graphics wise?
Yeah, of course I would expect them.
Would you pay for Crysis 1 and 2, which you've played through already?
Maybe
if they updated in graphics.
It's maybe I would.
So maybe I'm in the wrong here. Like I'm fully willing to admit that. Like,
you always are in the wrong.
If people, fuck off. If people are willing to fucking pay for this stuff, then fine, then whatever. Obviously, games developers are making the right choices on doing this.
Sure, like I said, well, I personally, I would have to debate it with myself, but I just think that it should be made available. If you one of those people who didn't get to play those games. But
would you rather that company, would you rather a developer spend the time on that or developing a new game?
It depends on which one it is. Like, you know, I prefer they can do both. You'll have the resources and money.
But say they can't do both.
I understand. So, you know, it's something to consider. Maybe like, you know, if they working on something and it just isn't falling apart, they could always be like, you know, we'll just remake something else or like re-release it. And yes, to answer your question, I would expect it to at least look as good as it can look on new gen, whether or not they're adding new content or again, like just including the DLC stuff. Okay. So that's fine. You know, that would be fine. So, you know, I guess we'll see, but it's interesting to, you know, see what's coming down the pipe right now and decide which ones, again, as I said, which games do you think are worth it to double dip on or not? From amongst those that are available that they're offering you. So, all right, guys. So that was very interesting. You guys are getting nuts over there, but let's calm it down and
getting serious.
We'll sign off for now. I, Scott Thurlow, bid you a good night,
and I, Steve Ramosi, bid you whatever, you know.
And I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer, and Steve and I are going to go fist fight outside.
And this episode will be available for a remix sometime soon. This has been Syntax Error. Thank you as always for listening, and we will see you next time. Music by Stephen Hermosi. Editing and engineering by Chris Morgan. Syntax Error is part of a Lost Signals Productions. All rights reserved.